Renzo had always believed that love, in its truest form, should feel like home. That's exactly what Jackson had become to him: shelter from the noise, warmth against the cold days, and someone to build routines with in their quiet apartment in Portland. Renzo, a 26-year-old interior designer, had fallen deeply for Jackson, a private and composed fitness coach originally from Texas. They were opposites, but that contrast made things feel complete. Jackson often spoke in few words, carried himself with restraint, and avoided sharing too much about his past. But in the space they shared, he was tender, thoughtful, and always present until the morning he wasn't. It was a Sunday when Jackson sat Renzo down and said he needed to go away, not away in the ordinary sense, but to a spiritual retreat. He needed to disconnect from phones, social media, and the world to reflect, recalibrate, and find balance. "It's not you. I just need clarity," he had said, his tone even and eyes unreadable. Renzo didn't argue. He wanted to. Every instinct in him screamed that something was off. But he'd learned over time that love sometimes meant giving space. So he hugged Jackson tightly at the door, told him to take the time he needed, and watch the man he loved disappear with a duffel bag and a promise to return soon. Days passed, silence grew louder. Renzo told himself this was what spiritual cleansing looked like: emptiness before clarity. Then, one night, a message popped up from a friend. No caption, just a link to a TikTok video. Renzo clicked. There, beneath the glaring studio lights of a reality dating show called Heartmatch USA, was Jackson, not meditating under trees or journaling in solitude. He was on stage, smiling beside a woman in a red dress, waving at the audience, and saying without hesitation, "I've never been in love with a man. I guess I've just been waiting for the right woman." The crowd clapped. The woman beamed. The camera zoomed in on Jackson's perfect smile. Renzo stopped breathing. His hands shook as he replayed the clip. Again and again. The voice, the body language, it wasn't just deception, it was performance. Calculated, polished, and broadcasted nationwide. Jackson hadn't gone on a retreat. He hadn't needed space, he had needed a rebranding. And Renzo, the man who kissed him goodbye that Sunday morning, had been deleted from the narrative like a typo. Tears didn't come right away. They never do when your heart breaks in public silence. Renzo stared at the screen until it blurred. This was the man he trusted, the story he believed, and the love he thought was mutual. Now the world saw Jackson as a romantic lead, and Renzo, he was just the ghost left behind. But ghosts don't stay silent forever. Subscribe to Heart Stories for more raw, emotional stories that matter. Renzo didn't sleep that night. He didn't cry either. His body felt like it was moving underwater, slow, heavy, uncertain. The TikTok video kept looping in his mind. Jackson's face, that smile, the lie. What hurt more than the betrayal was how easily it was performed. How convincingly Jackson had erased him on national television like they were never real. In the following days, the video gained traction. Talk shows praised Jackson's vulnerability. Social media called him the man who finally found the courage to love again. Viewers swooned over the red dress moment, and couples posted reaction videos under hashtags. Jackson became a sensation, a masculine ideal wrapped in soft trauma, the perfect image for daytime television. Meanwhile, Renzo faded in silence. He couldn't speak out. Screenshots meant nothing without context. There were no texts that screamed relationship, no photos posted online, no proof that what they had was real, because Jackson had always insisted on keeping it private. For our own peace, he once said. Now Renzo understood. That peace was preparation. His apartment, once a space of shared memories, turned hollow. Every mug, every blanket, every gym towel Jackson had left behind became evidence of a truth no one else believed. His friends didn't know what to say. Some offered support, some advised him to move on. No one really grasped the weight of being turned into a ghost. But Renzo wasn't built to stay quiet forever. One night, watching yet another interview where Jackson painted himself as the heartbroken bachelor, finally learning to trust women again, Renzo reached a breaking point. He stood up, walked to his desk, opened his laptop, and clicked apply on the official casting form for the next season of Heartmatch USA. In the field marked, "Why do you want to join?" He paused. Then he typed, "To reclaim the story that was stolen from me. And maybe, just maybe, to find someone who doesn't need to lie to be loved." Weeks passed. Renzo didn't expect to hear back. But then, an email arrived. He had been selected for the second round, then the third, then a Zoom call with producers. He shared pieces of his story, but not the whole. He talked about trust, betrayal, rebuilding. He talked about wanting to heal. Never once did he say Jackson's name. He didn't need to. The pain in his voice was real enough to move them. And just like that, Renzo became a contestant on the very show that had erased him. But he wasn't coming to play. He was coming to remember who he was before Jackson wrote him out. No one, not the producers, not the other contestants, not even the host knew who he really was to last season's star. But that truth would find its way. It always does. The villa was exactly as Renzo imagined it: bright, curated, and designed to look effortless. Cameras dotted every corner, their presence both invisible and omnipresent. The other contestants were friendly, eager, open in ways that felt rehearsed. Everyone wanted their moment. Everyone hoped for love or fame. Renzo stayed quiet. He wasn't there to win, not in the way they thought. He was there to reclaim his place in a story that had been hijacked and rewritten with him erased. This time, he would not be edited out. His entrance aired mid-season. The host introduced him with soft music and a line about new beginnings after heartbreak. The viewer saw a man with calm eyes and a past full of unspoken ache. Producers loved the mystery. The audience responded. Online, people speculated about what kind of woman would finally fix him. Renzo let them wonder. Every challenge, every dinner, every one-on-one conversation he participated, but never performed. While others exaggerated their quirks or flattered the cameras, Renzo chose silence. He listened more than he spoke. And when he did speak, he spoke in truth about honesty, about betrayal, about how trust once broken takes more than a rose to rebuild. One night, around a bonfire set up for a Heartshare episode, Renzo told a sliver of his truth. He didn't name Jackson, but he described a man who said he needed silence, then used that silence as a disguise to sell a fantasy. The crew fell quiet. One of the women reached for his hand. The host nodded, visibly moved. What the audience didn't see, however, was the fire in Renzo's eyes when the cameras panned away. He had learned that public healing was often a performance. But this wasn't about healing in public. This was about facing in public. Midway through filming, rumors surfaced that the show might bring back past participants for a special episode. A producer hinted offhandedly about someone from last season returning. Renzo's heart clenched, but his face didn't move. He knew what was coming. And when the announcement was made on set that Jackson would return for a special segment as the show's most successful alumni, something inside Renzo finally settled. Not in fear, not in panic, in purpose. The stage was being rebuilt for one final performance. But this time, the script wasn't theirs. It was his. Back in the dressing area, Renzo stared into the mirror. A makeup artist dabbed his face with powder, asking if he was nervous. He smiled politely, but inside he wasn't shaking. He wasn't scared. He was ready. They thought they invited a storyline. What they had invited was the reckoning. The studio lights burned hotter than usual. Producers had warned the cast it would be a special episode live, unscripted, with a surprise appearance. But Renzo knew there were no surprises for him. He had been waiting for this moment since the day he watched that viral clip. Now he was no longer the ghost. He was the one walking into the light. Audience members held signs. Cameras floated like quiet predators above the stage. The host stood center stage, smiling wider than necessary. Tonight, he said, We welcome back the man whose story captured hearts across the country, a journey of redemption, of rediscovered love. Please welcome Jackson Brooks. Applause exploded. The door opened, and there he was. Jackson stepped onto the stage, confident, camera ready, groomed to perfection. He waved, hugged the host, flashed the same smile Renzo had once fallen in love with, the same smile that had denied him, the same smile that lied. Renzo sat among the current contestants, hands steady, face unreadable. The camera panned across the group, capturing gasps and whispers. But when the lens landed on Renzo, everything paused, even the noise, even the movement. Because in that moment, something shifted. Jackson hadn't seen him yet. The host continued with pleasantries. Jackson, tell us, how has life been since Heartmatch Jackson launched into his script? How grateful he was, how many doors had opened, how he had found purpose in helping others through fitness, coaching, and workshops on emotional resilience. Then, the host turned to the contestants. Anyone here want to ask Jackson a question? A few hands lifted. One was Renzo's. The room went still. Yes, you, Renzo. Right, Renzo stood up slowly. Every eye trained on him. Jackson finally looked his way. It took less than a second for recognition to flood his face. He froze, his jaw tightened. But Renzo smiled. He turned toward the camera, toward the nation. My name is Renzo Calderon, he said clearly. I'm not just a contestant. I'm not just a story of healing. I'm the man Jackson once told. I need space to find clarity. And while I waited for him to return from a spiritual retreat, he stood exactly here telling millions that he had never loved a man. A collective intake of breath swept through the studio. Renzo didn't stop. I watched my life be rewritten. I watched myself vanish. And now I'm here, not to punish, not to shame, but to say my story matters too. Because I was real. Because love, even when hidden, leaves footprints. And I refuse to be erased. Jackson opened his mouth, closed it. The camera zoomed in. The host was speechless. The audience frozen. Renzo stepped back, never breaking eye contact. A producer rushed onto stage to cut to commercial, but it was too late. The truth had been spoken unrehearsed, undeniable, unstoppable, and it was live. The clip of Renzo's confrontation went viral within hours. It wasn't just the content, it was the calm in his voice, the weight in his silence, the way truth felt heavier than any scandal the show had ever staged. Viewers reposted it not as gossip, but as testimony. This, one tweet read, is what dignity looks like. Hashtag shifted. For the first time, Renzo's name trended above Jackson's. Jackson, faced with the consequence of his own performance, began losing brand deals. Public sympathy drained. Influencers who once celebrated his healing journey quietly deleted posts. Talk show invitations stopped. Sponsors pulled out. But for Renzo, something else began. Messages poured in emails, letters, DMs from people who had also been erased. People whose love had been hidden, whose truth had been rewritten to fit someone else's comfort. He read every one, sometimes crying, sometimes smiling, always listening. A few weeks later, Heartmatch USA aired its finale. The host made a surprise announcement. Renzo had been voted audience favorite by a historic margin. Not for his charm, not for a love story, but for his courage, for standing up not in bitterness, but in truth. That night, during the reunion segment, the host asked one final question on air. If you could choose one person to walk beside you now, not for cameras, not for shows, but for life, who would it be? Renzo paused. The studio lights softened. The audience leaned in. He smiled. I don't have to choose anymore, he said. He's already here. A quiet figure stepped out from behind the stage. Logan, the man who had written to him during the storm. Not a celebrity, not a contestant, a writer. Someone who, months before, sent Renzo a handwritten letter not for attention, not for clout, but to say I believe you. You matter. They met for coffee, then for long walks, then dinners that turned into conversations that ran past midnight. No cameras, no pretenses, just honesty and the beautiful awkwardness of beginning again. As Logan walked to the center of the stage, the audience went silent. Not the silence of scandal, but of something sacred. Renzo took his hand, their fingers interlocking naturally. No red dress, no retreat, just this. Renzo said softly, "This is what love looks like when it doesn't have to hide." Applause didn't erupt. It swelled gentle, respectful, real. And in that moment, on a stage once built for illusion, something genuine finally bloomed. Not a fantasy, not a twist, just a man who chose truth and the world that chose to see him. Have you ever been edited out of someone's story, even when you were the one who showed up? Share your truth. You never know who might need to hear it. Subscribe to Heart Stories for more stories that heal, inspire, and remind you you matter.